NODG and non-alcoholic fatty liver and fibrosis. Definition. Definition. Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is a complex condition involving the progression from simple steatosis, accumulation of fat in the liver, to inflammation, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis or NASH, and then to severe fibrosis and hepatocellular carcinoma, which are the major predictors of death in patients with this disease. Thanks to the major rise of obesity in the past years, this disease has increased in parallel with it.
The liver carries out many vital functions, including nutrient metabolism carried out by specialized cells called hepatocytes. For example, when excess glucose is present within the hepatocyte, it can be transformed into fatty acids, known as de novo synthesis. Hepatocytes are also key regulators of lipid metabolism. They take up fatty acids from blood and assemble them with glycerol to produce triglycerides. Lifestyle habits, such as a chronically unhealthy diet and a lack of physical activity, can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver, or NAFL with isolated steatosis, defined as an abnormal accumulation of fat in the hepatocytes. Individuals with associated metabolic disorders, such as insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, and obesity, are particularly at high risk to progress to a pathological state called non-alcoholic steatohepatitis, or NASH. In people with NASH, liver homeostasis is impaired due to accumulation of toxic lipids. Certain gut bacteria-derived products can also penetrate in the liver, where they activate immune responses. This contributes to local inflammation of hepatic tissue. This pathological environment provokes hepatocyte damage and leads to a state called ballooning. Steatosis, inflammation, and ballooning are the three lesions that define NASH histologically. Hepatocyte suffering, apoptosis, as well as inflammation lead to the release of signaling molecules that contribute to hepatic stellate cells activation. As a result of this activation, hepatic stellate cells secrete collagen fibers that form scar tissue, leading to hepatic fibrosis. NASH can evolve to cirrhosis or hepatocellular carcinoma, but it is much more than just a liver disease. It also increases the risk of life-threatening cardiovascular events in association with the proatherogenic lipid profile of NASH patients. A significant proportion of adults are affected by NASH globally in association with the rising prevalence of diabetes and obesity. By 2020, it is predicted that NASH will become the leading cause of liver transplantation. In the face of this growing silent epidemic, there is an urgent need to develop innovative treatments that can target the many different aspects of NASH pathology.
Applications in medicine. NODG proteins are implicated in metabolism. Inhibition of NODG signaling as a therapeutic strategy against fibrosis caused by non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Under normal circumstances, NODG signaling is abolished in hepatocytes after differentiation. Authors found an upregulation of this signaling in the livers of persons with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and in mice fed a NASH-inducing diet.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is quite prevalent in the general population, and in fact it varies by ancestry quite a bit. In a paper by Browning et al., they showed that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease had a prevalence of about 45% in Latino populations, about 24% in Caucasians, and about 12% in African Americans in a population in Dallas, Texas. Unfortunately, currently we don't have a lot of treatments for people that suffer from this condition. We usually ask them to lose weight, which is obviously not trivial in our current society. There's been a recent paper showing that individuals that have NASH or inflammation around the fat in their liver, that vitamin E for them may be helpful. But outside of that, there's not much more on the medical side that we can really offer these individuals. This is part of the reason why it's important to get a better understanding of what's the pathophysiology of this condition is, so that we can hopefully develop better ways to diagnose, manage, and treat these conditions in people that suffer from non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So a group of investigators that were interested in the genetics of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease joined forces to form the Genetics of Obesity-Related Liver Disease Consortium, or the GOLD Consortium. Within this consortium, we have genetic as well as phenotype data on over 7,000 individuals with measures of fat in their liver by computed tomography scans. What we did is we combined that data across all those groups and then followed them up in another set of data with histology-based non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and found 5 variants that associate with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. In our study, we found through the family-based analyses that the 5 variants that we discovered account for 20% of this heritability or genetic component. Overall, for a common genetic trait, which it's actually a very high number, and is very encouraging for these actually being of strong enough effect for us to look at these in individuals in the future. But those studies remain to be done.
Pros and cons. Pros: non-complicated diagnosis tests, liver tissue evaluation, imaging test, or abnormal liver function tests, LFTs, in the UK. At its first stages, it can be treated by losing weight and a healthy diet. Cons: non-alcoholic steatohepatitis can cause fibrosis or scarring of the liver, and also may lead to cirrhosis or liver cancer. No drug treatment has been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, but a few drugs are being studied with promising results. Issue applied in Ecuador. Clinical case. In the city of Quito, 2014, Marcos Iturralde, who suffered from obesity, was diagnosed with NASH type 2 at the age of 17 when he was being operated of an appendicitis and his surgeon found damaged tissue on his liver. Because of the early stage of his disease, the treatment consisted in a strict diet launched to losing a certain amount of weight, also combined with daily exercise. The diary El Telégrafo published they were reported 2,826 cases of non-alcoholic fatty liver patients in Ecuador, 2017. According to the health minister, who claimed most of the cases were related to obesity. Also, until January 24, 2018, 1,228 cases of the same disease were reported.
The people are not aware about this problem, and how one of my colleagues saying, we are playing with the storm. We are not aware that the storm is next to us.
The health burden and the cost burden for the societies will increase and explode with fatty liver disease, and that will cost the societies a lot of money.
The Litmus Project is an amazing collaboration that brings together academics and industry partners from all over the world and principally from Europe to specifically tackle the challenge of biomarker validation and qualification for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. We don't have good diagnostic tests. We're very reliant on biopsy. Now, biopsy is a useful tool, but it has limitations.
We have tried on the last 2 years to change the audiovisual media legislation regarding the hours of exposure to advertising, for example, for children. What I would like, there would be a better awareness of the severity and of the death-related, the mortality related with either alcohol or non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. This could lead to changing infectious policies.
It's high time we get aware of the problem and do something against it.
Conclusion. In conclusion, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease includes the progression from steatosis to NASH and finally fibrosis, who could evolve to liver cancer and later death. In order to fight this, a study by Su et al. Proposes the downregulation of NOTCH signaling as a therapeutic target against fibrosis in patients with this disease.
Non-alcoholic fatty liver disease really does affect 20 to 30% of the U.S. population. About 3 to 5% of the U.S. population will go on to develop steatohepatitis and steatocirrhosis, and it's now the single most common cause for liver failure in the United States. So these patients that have steatohepatitis are at risk for liver failure and liver cancer.
So it's in a patient that doesn't drink alcohol in amounts that will predispose them to have alcoholic liver disease. That in most cases will have risk factors, the ones that we call the metabolic syndrome, hypertension, hyperlipidemia, diabetes, and last but not least, obesity.
These patients actually are at risk for coronary artery disease because they have shared risk factors, and the most common cause for death in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is coronary disease, and they're at risk for exogenous malignancies.
The prevalence of disease is quite high. It's at least 5.5%. So if you look into take into account other liver diseases, it's at least 3 to 10 times more frequent than hepatitis C.
Signs that they may be progressing would be abnormal liver chemistries, marked fatigue, and obviously if they develop jaundice, ascites, bleeding, or hepatic encephalopathy.
So I will do some autoimmune and metabolic markers of liver disease, along with the viral hepatitis serologies if the liver tests are elevated. And if all of those markers are unremarkable in the right clinical setting, I probably will say this is most likely non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
So the mainstay of treatment is typically going to be exercise and weight loss and getting rid of the potential risk factors, good control of the diabetes, good control of the hypertriglyceridemia, good control of possible hypothyroidism, getting rid of any drugs that may be involved in terms of causing fatty liver disease and avoidance of alcohol.